welcome to ScreenHour with me, Mikey.
Me, Kieran.
The show where we give you our own impressions and experiences for films, series and games.
We'll start by sharing our initial spoiler-free impressions and we'll warn you before we deep dive into those spoilers.
If you enjoy our content, don't forget to follow us on your preferred platforms with our handle, ScreenHour. This week's episode's going to be on the wholly anticipated Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer heads up the Manhattan Project, which is building of the atomic bomb, and what progress is a life-changing event for Oppenheimer, but also the world going forward. So it's a kind of a big deal, and it's a really interesting story to follow. The old, Oppenheimer versus Barbie debate, or, the internet meme which has been going on, is at this point, we will be doing, an episode on Barbie in the next episode or two. But I haven't seen Barbie yet, and I can only imagine that they are polar opposites in the sense that Charlotte, my partner, came out and she watched Barbie yesterday and she came back from it and saying, there's a kind of upsetting bit all the end, but you come out the cinema with a warm, fuzzy feeling after and you feel happy. And don't get me wrong, this is my underlying sentiment for Oppenheimer as a film itself, is it's a masterpiece, but you will not leave the cinema feeling happier. It's a beautiful, intense film. It has as much gravitas as it deserves. And that's the way I'd say it. It's a great film, but it really, truly is what you expect.
I do completely agree with you there, to be honest, because when I left the cinema, literally I was in complete silence, to be honest, after I left the cinema. Because I was like, well, that's, you know it's not going to be an enjoyable, it's a weird thing to say, but it's not going to be an enjoyable experience, necessarily. You're not going to come out of the cinema feeling like, you're ready to take on the world and all of that sort of shit. You just sort of come out and you're a bit dumbfounded sort of thing. You're kind of just really taking in everything that you've just experienced and gone through and understood. And there's a lot to take note of. There's a lot of science there. There's the score, the cinematography, the script, the acting is incredible. There's so much to go off, but also knowing that it's a true event and the repercussions of the events, and particularly how the film decides to conclude, its final scene, you kind of just sort of holy fucking shit, I'm a bit depressed now. But it's weird to say that depression is a good thing, because it means that the film made you feel the way it wanted you to feel, to make you reflect on things that are happening in the world and all that.
I never set out to be this is going to be a funny satire film. Yeah, don't get me wrong, there's social commentary on it to a degree, and that is as Kieran referred to, particularly the last scene, and that is it's shocking, because all it does is spell out the truth. It's very possible, and it's quite scary. But the whole film really doesn't miss a beat. Don't get wrong, I really expected a lot going into this, because Christopher Nolan, I love Christopher Nolan films, blah, blah. I expected the score, I expected it to be as intense as it is. Another one I'm always talking about, he's long films in particular, you don't want them to feel long. And this doesn't feel long. It's on for 3 hours. And yeah, if you really want to be nitpicky, there's certain aspects you could have got rid of. But every scene is a scene you are deeply interested in.
Everything feels necessary to tell the story that it's trying to tell. As you say, it doesn't feel like 3 hours, because the pacing is done really well. And you just feel like you're just moving on, and you're building ground, and you're building, this character, the world around him, and everything. Everything seems to be moving along at a nice pace, and everything feels necessary. Because I thought about that, what would I have deleted or taken out of the film? And I'm sure on a second watch, third, fourth, fifth watch, I will find things where I'm I would probably taken that scene out or that or whatever. But after a first initial watch, I can't think of a scene that I'd be like, I'd remove that because that felt a bit pointless. Everything felt necessary, especially right at the beginning. There's a real long lead up to, because at the end of the day, you know, you're waiting for the explosion. That's what you're waiting for, right? But there is a long lead up to that, and everything feels necessary because it's telling the story of who Oppenheimer was rather than who he was just for, you know, the creation of the atom bomb. It's who he was when he first went into Oxford University and then progressed from there, sort of thing. So you see him, you know, as a younger Oppenheimer and through to his life, and everything just feels necessary. It's just giving you the backstory without sort of holding your hand or anything like that. Everything just felt necessary. It just felt well done.
To that point, one of like the notes I have is honestly, it's just so fucking smooth. It just flows beautifully, and for a 3-hour film, it just doesn't miss a beat in that. There's no real lulls. There's no really boring parts at all. And don't get me wrong, it's a very methodical film. But on top of that, one of the things I feel like it works to its strength, especially towards the end, where there's almost, like, we're going to spoilers, but there's almost like 2 parts of the film, but like part of the framing of him going back and telling the story of like the indictment, like, type of thing. And then there's like towards the end of the interview, there's another like thing which comes into play with Robert Downey Jr.'s character, and that is in like quite an interest. Like, the film didn't have to do that, and that's again like just another really like delicious icing on the cake. I'll get into that more in spoilers. Something which the film has been built up on for a while, and like probably about like 18 months ago, probably like even before then, probably about two years ago, the cast for this was just kept building up, and the pressure of it, like, to be fair, Cillian Murphy, I have never seen him put in a bad performance. And like the very fact that he was cast as Oppenheimer, everybody was just like, cushy sweet, this will be good. And then it's just Matt Damon, Emily Blunt, Florence Pugh, Benny Safdie. It's just, those names just keep coming. Even like just roles which aren't that big, they're having like actors who will absolutely nail it. Like Jack Quaid has like a semi-important role. This Kenneth Branagh is like a long-time collaborator with Christopher Nolan, and he plays quite an interesting role. Robert Downey Jr., as far as I know, is the first time he's worked with Christopher Nolan, and he, you know, in some of the junkets, he's joked about it. There's like, I think that's for the Wide interview, he says, what would it be if Christopher Nolan directed The Avengers? And Christopher Nolan turned around and says, Robert Downey Jr. would have been in it even more because he really enjoyed working with him. I'm interested to see where that working relationship could go, because they really smash it in this. But what I'm trying to get to is that there's no real actor who lets the side down at all, whose performance just is bad. There's actors who get more to do, and that's just the nature of filming, nature of theatre, nature of just stuff indeed. In particular, especially towards the end, there's a scene with Emily Blunt, and she absolutely smashes it. But what is quite refreshing, especially, and this is to Mission Impossible's like positive and Oppenheimer's positive, is that it's nice to sit and watch a film where it's mostly talking and intense scenes, and then just, you know, a little realisation of an atomic bomb scene going off, which is exactly what you wanted and expected in the sense that it was a beautiful scene, and like there's these stages of it with the sound design and just seeing the explosion, the anticipation. It's just, I don't know, it's like a beautifully sweet cooked like caramelised onion, where there's a lot of layers to it, and it was cooked right with a lot of sugar, and it's on top of a beautiful steak. It was just that the Trinity, the test, that goes really well. And so what I quite liked about it as well is that they do delve into the repercussions of your consciousness and like, you thinking they made the atomic bomb and the effects that would have on you once it's dropped on Hiroshima. It's the test you see, so it's not soured by
Event.
the event of like the emotional repercussions of actually dropping it. The Trinity is just the test, and don't get me wrong, there's nothing just about it. It's like testing an atomic bomb, but it's quite cool that scene itself is just them being happy, them celebrating that they've done it, they've finally done it. I don't know, there's a lot to unpack, there really is.
I mean, what's interesting for me was of the atomic bomb, of Nagasaki and Hiroshima, and and the extent of our knowledge, Mikey, is the fact that we've experienced those sort of events in video games or watched it in some films. Other than that, it's not a big topic that's ever taught in schools or anything like that. So we don't know all about Oppenheimer and who was the German one?
So what I will say is Matt Damon's probably the most likable general since Maximus Meridius. Like his scenes and semi-rapport and banter with Oppenheimer is some of, again, it's not a fun film, but if there's any like enjoyable scenes of which they are, not so much like the experience of the cinema, the enjoyable scenes to watch is the back and forth between Matt Damon and Cillian Murphy.
Matt Damon is the comic relief, but don't think he's the comic relief. Big quotations, he's not the comic relief, but if there's any comedy, it's coming from him, for sure. But the guy I was thinking of was Heisenberg, who was the German one, and that sort of, it's all that history behind it is not something that we know a lot about. So a lot of my understanding of these events and how they unfolded and everything was from this film. And I know Christopher Nolan tries to be as accurate to history and to science as he possibly can. Obviously, there'll be some movie dramatization there, of course. What was good about the film is how it didn't necessarily hold your hand, as I mentioned earlier, but it does guide you along the path of who Oppenheimer was, the fact that he met Heisenberg, and how everyone in that scientific community basically knew each other. And it was the creation of this bomb, and then how they were trying to create the bomb because they, we need to beat the Nazis. But can we be trusted with it? I don't know. But we know the Nazis can't. We know the commies can't. We know the Russians can't. So that's what it was all about. It was being the first in the race, and it's the achievement for all of that. And what I think they did well is, as you say, they don't show you the event itself of them bombing Hiroshima or Nagasaki. You don't see that. You just see a scene where you're basically, the camera's watching Cillian Murphy, watching footage of the aftermath of, this is several months after the bombs, and you're seeing Cillian reacting to seeing these, the bodies and the news of how these people died during the blast, but these people were still dying weeks later from the radiation poison and all of that. And then you see that toll on him. So I think they did it, they handled it very well, in a sense that they allowed us to keep focused on Oppenheimer and how he foresees the aftermath of his creation and how that takes a toll on him and how he realizes how that has affected the world going forward. And that brings it right down to that final scene, which we'll go into spoilers with later on. But it's how it all accumulates to that, and it's rather about, spoilers, the film is called Oppenheimer, not, the atomic bomb that bombed Hiroshima or Nagasaki. That's the big thing here, is it's about Oppenheimer and who he was and the creation of the A-bomb. And, as Christopher Nolan has said, Oppenheimer is one of the most important people to maybe have ever lived. Most definitely for our, current generations, because the events that the emotions he put forward is very much impactful of what we as a human race, fall over today, sort of thing, if that makes any sense. That's not how I wanted to word it, but that's how I've worded it.
It's a really good character study. I think that's another to go off what Kieran saying, is that it shows you the emotional turmoil that you'd go through if you was like, he heads up the project, he's the director of the project. That's why the film's called Oppenheimer. In the nature of like whenever you complete a team project, and unfortunately in the way the cookie crumbles in life, even though you might be the team member who's done 80% of their work, you weren't the manager, you weren't the director, so people remember him. So obviously it was chosen to be Oppenheimer, but like he says, particularly after the bombs dropped, that's when he starts suffering with, the real issues to do with that. But even during the making of it, what I quite liked about it was there's a few times when he discussed with his colleagues about, the moral high ground, or, there isn't really no high ground for it, to discuss it, just the morality of this. And we get into it in spoilers, but also the underlying, I won't say go as far to say as a political thriller aspect of the film, but there is like political drama sides towards it. So that's another positive, and that's what I like about that, is that's I don't know, another arrow in the quiver of the film, but it's not the main crux of the film. It just only boosts how good it is. The only real cons I've got for the film is it is a long film, despite it doesn't feel like one, but for the casual cinema goers, and the risk of sounding patronising, it is a long film.
You need to kind of be a Nolan fanboy to be prepared to put yourself through it, if that makes sense. As you say, the average moviegoer will probably have a tough time with this film. They'll probably still enjoy it, but they will probably have a tough time with it just because it's a long, I don't want to say laborious, but it's a long film.
Nah, I wouldn't go that far. I won't even go the far as saying that I was being a Nolan fanboy. I just go in knowing that it is going to be a long film. But every scene is great. The only other con, again, it's what you expect, but it's a masterpiece. And I can see why they had Barbie come out as well, because unless you are, a diehard cinema goer who would like to see both or whatever, like us or whatever, they are parallels, they are different, are so opposites. Is that it's what you expect. It might be a masterpiece, but it's not a fun blockbuster film. You're not going to have the same fun times of watching a Mission Impossible, watching a Barbie, watching Indiana Jones, watching Transformers, or doesn't matter what it is. It's not a popcorn flick.
No,
it's not like that. But I don't want to speak for Kieran too much, but we both give it a green badge. If I could give it out of 10, I'd honestly give it a 9.9 out of 10. I'd give it 5 stars. I really would. But that doesn't mean, for a lot of people, put it this way, if you're having a bad day at work, I wouldn't suggest you to go watch this film. That's one of the ways I could describe it.
I think I agree with that entirely, because that's literally one of my, I wouldn't say it's a negative, but it is not a film you would watch again for enjoyment. The reason you would watch this film again is in order to study it, because it is like a masterclass in storytelling and filmmaking. It made biographical pictures interesting, and you could say, yes, because of a bomb, but, it's not about the bomb, it's about Oppenheimer, and there's so much that goes on that is more than about the bomb, and I think that's the thing everyone just needs to know, is it's a character study, and you don't go to watch this film to enjoy it. You go to watch this film to study it and understand it, and and experience incredible filmmaking. It's a very weird thing to suggest or even compliment. You know, you won't enjoy it, but you'll think it's incredible. You know what I mean? It's an odd thing to say.
Funny enough, like, not to get like too far like left field, but all a bit random, is a lot of people when I went to the Holocaust Museum, I went to Auschwitz, and I said it's really weird. I says because I'd recommend everybody to go, but I wouldn't go again myself.
Yeah.
And by that I mean, like, I fully 100% agree with what Kieran's just said. It is a masterpiece film. You watch it again for the storytelling. But I know for a fact Kieran's seen Mission Impossible, God knows how many times. You would not watch this film again in the same week for a laugh.
No.
But this, at the same time, God, it's fucking great. It's honestly just, I know it sounds paradoxical and, I don't know, contradictory, but it really is.
My only like big criticism, it's not a massive criticism, but I wasn't keen on the soundtrack for Tenet, but I know Ludwig is like a solid composer, but I just didn't feel like it was his best work. But this film was evidence that he completely nails the score, and he gives you that added level of sort of like uncertainty and adrenaline all in one, just to keep you like on the edge of your seat for 3 hours. It's done so well. But just like Tenet, the music overpowers the dialogue, and that's that's not Ludwig's fault necessarily. That's just a mixing issue. And could that have just simply have been my cinema screen? You know, it's one of those things. But because Nolan dives so deep into the science of everything, and this film is very heavy on the dialogue, as we've already mentioned, you want to know all of the, well, at least I do. I want to know all of the science. I want to know everything that's going on. And there's a lot of times where I just had no idea what the hell the characters were saying because I just couldn't quite hear it over the music. And I know some scenes were designed like that, where sometimes there's quite a few people talking or there's people in the background. So it was meant to seem a bit chaotic, you know, and I understand that when that's like the scene and that's the way it's done. But when it's just like, you know, one-on-one character and they're talking to each other and you can't hear it, I'm like, come on. So I had to spend a bit of time sort of just trying to use common sense to understand what it is they've just said or mentioned to each other. And I think that's just a bit of a shame. Again, it could have been the cinema screen, but because of Tenet and then watching Tenet afterwards, like after seeing it in the cinema, the music was still overpowering, and there's no sort of way to mix it yourself. And that's a big problem. Like with video games, you know, go into your settings and you can just do
change dialogue. You can increase the dialogue and decrease like general sound effects and music. Yeah.
You know, well, it's like, why can't I do that? Just that myself with films. Yeah, obviously the directors done it this particular way, and that's how they want to be perceived. But sometimes, like, I'd just like to take a little bit of ownership because the dialogue is always so quiet in films that you kind of just want to boost that one up just a little bit more. But again, that's really my only critique coming out of that screen, because I want to know more of what was said. You know, if anything, put the fucking subtitles on for me.
I'll tell you what I do think as well is there's a few, like Casey Affleck is an actor I did not expect to be in it. And he's only really in one scene, and that scene's incredibly intense.
It's fucking creepy.
It's creepy almost, yeah. It's also particularly with, again, seems like specifics, so we get into spoilers, but the few scenes with Florence Pugh in her character are really, not just due to what she does in particular.
Oi, Samaloi.
But there's also, like, I don't know, she's just really interesting.
You know.
And so's, I don't know, there's so many, and again, to counteract that is also Albert Einstein's in the film. He's in the marketing for the film, and he's in probably.
Isn't it more than you think he's gonna be? To be actually,
isn't it more than you think he's gonna be? But despite him being Albert Einstein, he's in like pinnacle, like prominent scenes, but he doesn't steal the show. and I think that's done really well.
Yeah.
He's obviously Einstein is interested in his fucking himself, so that's done really well. But there's no real, I don't know, I can't think of cons which really come out to me. So let's head into spoilers. Before we deep dive into spoilers, we're going to give you a green badge. You need to go experience it as soon as you can, and we'll expand further in a moment or two.
We'd also like to take this time to sincerely thank you for listening to us, and if you would like to participate in an episode, you can leave your thoughts on what you'd like to see us cover next in the comments below or through our Instagram.
Remember, you can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and Instagram with our handle ScreenHour.
Now, it's time for those spoilers. Are you ready?
Ordinary guy, an actor who I haven't seen in much, I like in a really like prominent cool scene. Well, he's in quite a few prominent scenes, and his character I found like, I don't know, probably most likable because he goes on a similar journey as the audience, put it that way, and he learns things as they happen, and he, as most audience goers,
It does what the audience wants them to do.
yeah, and he also he'd react how you're reacting during the film. I liked Robert Downey Jr.'s just, I didn't majorly see it coming, but I thought they were pushing it a bit, and once they said it, I think Emily Blunt said it, and it's the nature of men, is that because Oppenheimer wrecked him in that scene when he was saying about shipping the isotopes, people don't forget that, like.
But don't forget being humiliated, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a mega narcissistic bloke, like, but if someone done it to me, unless like I looked back and was like, I'm a cock, I was mean to that person, so I can see why they wrecked me. Even if you were just wrong and someone went out the way to embarrass you, I'd be like, yeah, fuck them, and you'd remember it.
It's also because he had the power and status as well to do the retaliation. You know, if you don't have that power and status to retaliate, it's kind of a moot point. But because he had that power and status, he used it to its full effect.
Yeah. But Florence Pugh's sex scenes with Cillian Murphy, you could, going into it, think, oh, that's a bit random. I don't know how I feel about that. But particularly, so the framing for it, most of like the film is Kim getting interviewed for this indictment and getting wrecked. Basically, it's like, it's your facade. You know, everybody's set up. His defense lawyer has not got the same information. He's not got the evidence. They're all pinned against him, whatever. And the point where he's talking about when he met Florence Pugh's character,
Jean
Tadlock, that's it, Tadlock. And they talk about when he met her.
She's a commie.
And she's a commie, and the old like political can of worms that is. And she's just, it shows Emily Blunt's point of view almost, of her just imagining just them having sex and like rolls her up. And, you know, that's happened, that can happen, you know, it's jealousy for you. And that was done well. The bit where, and it almost, again, is it a bit over sexual? I don't know. But I feel it was quite interesting when she's like, I'll read the book, like read. And she's just, they're just banging when he's talking about I am deaf or whatever. So I thought that was quite, I don't know, that was quite foretelling. And he's also quite young at that point, so he would be quite cocky as well. So he hasn't grown up as much. The twist Aldrin's character of him when he learns that Robert Downey Jr. like pinned it on him and he's trying to throw Oppenheimer under the bus as much as he can, and how he at the end is just like, fuck Robert Downey Jr. You know his job was to be his advisor, be his assistant, help him out as much as he can. And when he learns that, he goes, fuck him. And he's like, maybe, because he asks him about that again, and what I'm saying is about the prominent scene with Albert Einstein in, the ones he's in. And he just says, maybe just talking about something more important
Than you.
In particular, you. And Robert Downey Jr.'s character couldn't fathom that, like.
Yeah, it's like, well, of course they're talking about me, yeah.
Yeah. And then, like we said, the ending scene of them just talking about how fucking diabolical, and how crazy the concept of nuclear weapons is, and just the atomic bomb, that was like the tip of the iceberg. And now they're like, can be, we see it in Mission Impossible films, but it's fucking real. There's now kind of nuclear weapons can fit in a briefcase.
Yeah.
And it's scary. And they're so, I don't know, so plausible, so not easy, don't get it wrong, not easy to make, but, there's a couple of them, don't get me wrong, and
there's more than two.
There's more than two, like, don't get, so, and it just shows you the gravitas and how, it's not social commentary in the sense that, let's have satire, let's have a laugh, but it scares you because it's real, it can happen, and to the, these missiles, and these missiles engulf the world, and you see like the fucking start of a Fallout game, and it's scary because that can happen. And all it needs is really, just the wrong people to be pissed off at each other.
Exactly, yeah. That final scene between Oppenheimer and Einstein is kind of a scene that I think will always be in your head. It's not a scene you could easily forget, because as I say, that's like the final. I can't remember if that's the final scene right before like the end of the film, or if there's like a scene just before that or not. I can't remember exactly what he says, but it was basically like, we started the destruction of the world sort of thing. And it's just what he said and how it's said. I can't remember now. But I was just like, holy fucking shit, that's depressing. And that's so right. And then like the film ends and he just sort of like, oh, what do I do now? Where do I go?
It's just, and that's the scary thing. It's just, what it does really is, it's the opposite of a warm, happy feeling, because it does. And again, this, I cannot say this enough. You should go see the film, but it does make you feel a bit insignificant as well.
Oh yeah,
it's crazy. Like, I'm like, go see this film, it'll make you feel insignificant. But it's a masterpiece because it makes you feel like that. For the last 3 hours, it's been building up Oppenheimer as a character study, how big of a deal making the atomic bomb was, and then it just shows you in the last closing scene or two, how it's affected the future. And to be fair, if you've got half a brain, you don't really need to be told that too much. But again, that, like Kieran said and I've said, is that it doesn't spoon feed you stuff, but it doesn't mean it doesn't stop you. This last scene being quite emotional,
like the big question for me, like if you look at Nolan's catalogue of films, it's like, this is probably his film that's most different to all of his other films. It's probably closer to Dunkirk in a way. But my big question I was thinking was, why did Nolan make this film? And you've seen in interviews where he says it's because Oppenheimer was the most important man to ever exist. But I think it also goes deeper than that, because just like the practitioner Bertolt Brecht, he gave us the entertainment, but also left us with a sense of obligation, of correction, or simply the catalyst for conversation on the current morals of political interests and satire for our time. My third studies degree finally coming into use. Oppenheimer, is the beginning of the end of the world as we know it. The human race is so detrimentally focused on destroying itself. We now have arms that can wipe out the world, and with one wrong word and someone ballsy enough to push the button, the globe can be wiped out. The greed for more resources, food, water, the monopoly over global trade. At the end of the day, it all means nothing. We all end up getting buried in the dirt. But the human race is insistent on destroying itself. And I believe this film is an eye-opener, or even a wake-up call to be like, look, can't you see what you're doing? Just because you can doesn't mean that you should. And Oppenheimer may have been the catalyst for this great change of spiraling destruction, but we can still steer ourselves off this course if we do what is needed. I mean, even in Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning, they say that the next war will be a ballistic war, one for the fight over our dwindling resources, breathable air.
Well, I think the thing is that war wouldn't be war anymore, is that since the atomic bomb was dropped, they've only, like you say, developed nuclear weapons even further, is that war used to be like fighting over land, fighting over resources. And once you drop a nuclear weapon or something to that extreme, that area isn't inhabitable for fucking 20 odd years, for like close to 30 odd years, so you're not taking land, it's for the sake of taking land back.
But you're eliminating not just the land, you're eliminating the people on that land. So you're basically saying, if that land doesn't exist, it doesn't need these resources, so we can keep them and harbour them for ourselves.
I think, not to get like too sidetracked and like, political thing, is that Kieran's right in some words to a degree. Is like, it is just scary. If you think about it too long, it's more depressing. Like,
but as we know, like movies tend to over dramatize these things.
That's the strength of the film.
It's like to grab our attention, and it's not a stretch too far from the truth anyway, because the human population has never been closer to the brink of destruction as we see it. And I think it's inevitable. Because the ones who can make the difference, aren't the average bloke like me or Mikey. It's the fat cats, billionaires, millionaires, politicians, fanatics. They have the ability to avert this, but they are so overwhelmed by greed of what they can do, they never stop to think if they should. And that is what I think Nolan is trying to put forth to us. Not that we are helpless in our endeavour, that's my own light-hearted spin. But we do have the ability to change, and just don't let Oppenheimer's final words to Einstein be gospel. That final bit is something that's going to sit with us, and it's, that's the entire film. That is a bit that's still going around and around in my head, like, and I can't seem to shake it. And it's like, yeah, he's right. That it kind of is the beginning of the end in a way, but how do we stop that? And I saw something great the other day. And you know how people always say, oh, you don't want to time travel and go back in time, because if you make one little change.
I mean, the butterfly effect.
Yeah, it's the butterfly effect, and then you affect everything in the future. But if you to say to someone today, if you make this one little change, it will massively impact your future for the better. But they don't believe it. But for some reason, going back in time and making that little change will completely blow up history. But you don't want to make that change today. In a sense, this is what Nolan's saying, is we need to make that change today because we can still change our future. I think that's why he made this film, as well as like, from a filmmaking standpoint, he wanted to do something incredible. But
I don't think it's quite a rally call for the people, as in it's people power, but I also think it's probably the most thought-provoking film for a long time in that sense, and especially Nolan films. Dunkirk, like Kieran said, compared it to Dunkirk. It's Dunkirk. I came out of the cinema, I was trying to think, what other factual films has he done? And Dunkirk isn't really, like, it's based on an event, don't get me wrong, but it's not, and he's probably inspired by different people, but I don't 100% quote me on this, but I don't think they're particular, like, real life people. They're probably inspired by.
The main character was called Tommy because he was meant to be like the every guy. The Tommy he could be anyone.
Yeah, exactly. But this in particular, you focuses on Oppenheimer, and it just really. I'm not saying I want him to do biopics again or like loads, but it just shows that I've never thought he didn't have it in him, but he obviously has it in him, like, type of thing. It's a beautifully intense film.
Yeah.
Particularly the moment, and I laughed because of just how, like, wrong it was and how, like, scary.
And because of your dark humour.
Because of illustrated it was and my dark humour. But after the bombs dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, they're still in a camper, like, in New Mexico. They're in their little, like, man-made town type of thing.
Los Alamos.
Yeah. They're still in Los Alamos. So they celebrate. And there's God knows how many of them. There's loads of them. It is, like, that's why it's built a small town. And being a director of the Manhattan Project, as expected, Oppenheimer makes a speech. And he's thinking of the speech and he's talking about the speech there and then. But at the time, he's having the opposite of a nice, good weed trip. He's having scary, like, regret of him seeing almost, again, I shouldn't really make light remarks of it at all because it's a horrible thing, but they're like ghouls from Fallout. He's seeing like people, radiation victims of the bomb, while he's talking about it, and he's sweating his tits off. He's almost having a panic attack because he's having to deal with the consequences of that while he's thinking of it.
And this is before he actually sees the footage of what the bomb did.
Yeah, and all this is in the juxtaposition of him, you know, making a speech to celebrate that the bomb worked, that they've pretty much won the war because of that, and they've killed fucking thousands of people with their work. It was a nail in the coffin. So he's telling everybody there, well done, we've fucking done it. I just wish we'd made it sooner to make a drop on the Germans. He says, I bet Japan didn't like it. And that's when I just laughed because I was almost in shock, like, when you're laughing, like, just out of pure nerves type of thing, just because it's so unsettling. And that's what it was. Like, it was more just a combination of my dark humour and just how well the film was done. It was a masterpiece. There was just a few characters I would have liked to see more of, but it's a fucking 3-hour film and I would not wanted to cut it more. Every scene with actual Oppenheimer in was great, obviously, but
He's in every scene, Mike.
the interactions between him and Matt, General Groves type of thing, I wanted more of that. That was great. Florence Pugh, like her mental health crisis she goes through, she kills herself. I would like to see that a bit more.
Well, she kills herself, big quotation marks, because there's someone holding her underwater in one particular take. Do you remember seeing that?
Oh, I don't remember seeing that. So you think someone like a spy killed her?
So yeah, it showed us like her killing herself, but then there's another like take, sort of like I guess I call it a take, where there's actually someone with dark leather gloves holding her under the water, and I missed the dialogue because of the music, but it was something about she either killed herself or someone killed her because of her commie past or something, and it's like, I don't know, trying to keep her quiet from
blowing the lid, like
blowing the lid,
keeping up, like, protesting and pushing her agenda per se.
Yeah, but it's literally like, it's such a sort of thing. Like, if you blink, you miss that sort of scene.
I would have liked to seen that more explored.
Yeah,
Emily Blunt, great. But I probably also feel she was in it just enough, maybe.
Emily Blunt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think she was in it just enough.
Particularly, seeing at the end when they tried to, like, Jason Clarke smashes it as the prosecutor. His intense scenes.
His name, Jason Clarke's name on the billing, he's not like one of the main names. And I said he has far more screen time and importance than Florence Pugh, but he's not the name that Florence Pugh is at the moment. At one point, Zero Dark 30, Dawn of Planet of the Apes, Everest, he was a bigger name, but he doesn't seem to be that name anymore because
I think if it was 6 years ago, you're right.
Yeah.
When those films were coming out, if it was like 6-7 years ago, you would have been right. He probably would have got more billing. But because of Florence Pugh, he's absolutely smashing it. Well, she has done for years, but even more so in the last couple of years. Even, like, I know, I watched Don't Worry Darling recently. I know Kieran doesn't like really that.
Well, she's the best thing in it, along with Chris Pine, despite how weak the script was, in my opinion.
I don't know. I think that film, like, it has actually, like, it's really good, and it just falls on its head and lasts like 20 minutes. But no, yeah, Jason Clarke smashes it.
I really liked how we can constantly see Oppenheimer battling with his sort of inner demons as well, because they have that meeting where they talk about how they're going to create the bomb. And the one guy, I can't remember his name, I think it's like Edwards or something like that. And he comes up with, what about the H-bomb, the hydrogen bomb?
Yeah, it's Benny Safdie's character, that is, yeah.
Yeah. And he basically, and Oppenheimer says, well, how would you do it? And he says, well, we need to use fission. And he's like, well, you need an A-bomb to create the fission, so we'll just make the A-bomb, like the H-bomb sort of thing, right? But the whole battle in his mind sort of thing is that Oppenheimer knew how destructive the H bomb would be over the A bomb, and it was basically him sort of making everyone keep focused on the A bomb and not the H bomb, because he realized how devastating the H bomb would be.
He was trying to do damage control despite him using an atom bomb.
He knew that creating a bomb would create casualties, but he was trying to limit the amount of casualties that there would be. So he's constantly battling with that. Knowing that he's going to bring this destruction, he's choosing the lesser of the two evils, but he knows that one of them is still an evil,
despite them being both being very evil.
What I also liked as well is, we haven't mentioned it yet, is the use of the colour. So you've got scenes in black and white and you've got scenes in colour. As Nolan loves to do, he loves to play with time. So you are constantly bouncing back and forth between different timelines within like the same 10 minutes. And you've got like, I want to say it's de-aging, but I don't want to say that and you think I'm talking about CGI de-aging. It's makeup de-aging, and it's fucking brilliant. It's so well done. Killian looks so young and then he looks so old. And then right at the end of the film, when they make him look fucking 80 or 90, that was scary how good that was. That was incredible. But he's going back and forwards with time, different time periods and stuff. But Nolan uses the colour, or rather the lack of colour. When we experience the colourised scenes, we're in Oppenheimer's head and we see how he saw it. Whereas if it's black and white, we see how Strauss, I know that's not how he says his name, it's like Strauss or something like that. But Robert Downey Jr.'s character, if it's in black and white, that's how he sees it. And, hopefully it's not too on the nose to say that Strauss's point of view was more black and white, whereas Oppenheimer saw it in, many layers, as the highs, the lows, but also the grey areas too. So I think that black and white is basically saying this is how Strauss sees it. He sees it in black and white. He humiliated me. I'm getting my own back, right? And I'm throwing on the bus.
Yeah, despite it being black and white, that's not the facts of what happened. That's like how Strauss sees it. That's the facts for him. So he's very cocksure that happened. So that was his motivation for that. But this is what I was like saying in before spoilers, is that if the film was just about the Manhattan Project and the process of making the bomb, that would have been interesting. That would have been just a great film in itself. But the interviewing and the framing and, and I mean the actual framing of Oppenheimer and Strauss throwing him under the bus, that's just another good storyline, which on top of that interesting story of the Manhattan Project, they really neatly interchange with each other, really flows just really well. And it's not something you thought going into it. Well, me obviously in particular, I thought going into it would be a strength for the film, but it's not something I asked for. I thought I was just going in to see the process of the bomb and the character study of Oppenheimer. But the indictment of him and how they turned on him, in particular Robert Downey Jr. and his vindictiveness, is just something really interesting. I think that's obviously another thing the film can get praised for quite a lot, I feel, is how everything's treated in layman terms. Just the creation of the bomb. Is that it doesn't knock you over the head that you're a baby, but, you don't have to be fucking a high-level physicist to realise the process of it. And that's something, don't get me wrong, you expected, but that's really just done really well.
Yeah, you expect there to be like science terms and stuff that will go over your head, but you appreciate that nonetheless.
Yeah, exactly.
You still understand the bare bones of it, but yeah, if you want to know more, then you got to research more.
The black and white effect, again, I don't think that's overused either. I think that's done well.
No. And after a while, you kind of like forget. I mean, you do that anyway when you watch black and white films. I don't think Mikey watches black and white films, but I watch a few black and white films every now and again. And you're just like, initially you're like, oh, it's in black and white. And then after like 5 minutes, your mind puts in all the colours and everything.
My closing point, honestly, is just that despite it being about a horrific event, it's just a very intense, beautiful film. You won't leave the cinema feeling great, but it's a great experience.
Before I give you my closing bit, I liked how just the very subtle thing of you saw the flash, then you heard the sound.
Yeah.
Most explosions and stuff in films, the visual and the sound happen simultaneously. You know, or sometimes there's like maybe a second delay or whatever. But in this, there's a massive delay and like everything just goes silent. And I was the cinema screen I was in. I haven't seen a cinema screen that packed since way before, you know, COVID times, like 2018. I haven't seen the cinema that packed. Even in 2018, I don't recall seeing the cinema that packed. I was like shoulder to shoulder to people, and every single person was silent, and that blast went off. And literally everyone was just sort of like, when's the sound coming? That's literally what everyone was waiting for. And then boom. But I would say I really appreciated that. But my final thing I'll leave you with is, at the end of the day, they were the only ones to ever drop the bomb. And that's not something you can ever really forget, is it?
I don't know what you tried to do there. I think that's a bit that's a bit high on the moral ground, isn't it? And I ain't particularly got time for a recommendation.
I was just going to say Futurama's back.
Yeah, do that then. Go on.
Futurama is back. I've already said it. There we are.
But take it easy.
Yeah, take it easy, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.
Goodbye.
Bye.